Hey everyone, welcome to the Mobile User Acquisition Show. In the Mobile User Acquisition Show, we feature interviews with the smartest folks in mobile and growth who share invaluable, actionable, tactical insights on every aspect of mobile growth and marketing, not to mention some adjacent areas just as well. The Mobile User Acquisition Show is presented by me, Shamant Rao, CEO of the mobile growth marketing firm Rocketship HQ, and produced by Karishma Sundaram, our superstar content marketing manager at Rocketship HQ. Each episode includes strategies, tips, and pointers from the leading edge of mobile growth marketing that you can use to unlock tremendous growth for your app in a sustainable and capital efficient manner. Our guest today is Adam Lovallo, CEO and founder of Thesis, the host of the MAU Talk podcast, and the founder of Grow.co. Adam was our very first guest on our other podcast, How Things Grow, and his episode on the rise and fall of the daily deal space was a very interesting behind-the-scenes peek into a roller coaster of a time that he had lived through. Today, we are excited to talk to him about a subject that he feels very strongly about, incrementality. We start by talking about what incrementality is and how to identify easy signs of underlying issues and problems with campaigns, and why Facebook and Google reported numbers can be problematic. Adam then goes on to describe his prescriptions for how UA teams can solve for incrementality issues, discussing the efficacy and potential outcomes of each. Finally, we talk about the role of MMPs, about how iOS 14 plays into all of this, and the critical importance of understanding your channel mix in budgeting and performance decisions, especially in understanding the true economics of your business with what can sometimes appear to be old school ways to track and measure this, like blended CPAs or marketing as a percentage of revenue. This is a masterclass in understanding the true impact of your performance marketing, and it's very much an unmissable episode for anyone who has questions for somewhat easy ways to fix and address a lot of these challenges. Enjoy. I'm very excited to welcome Adam Lovallo to the Mobile User Acquisition Show. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you, Adam. Certainly because you were our first guest on our other podcast, How Things Grow, hugely popular episode. You took us down the memory lane of somewhat crazy times. And also, of course, I have looked up to you every time we've met in New York, in MAU, which you run. And of course, you have a podcast of your own. But for today, I would love for us to talk about incrementality, which is something you think a lot about, speak a lot about, and it's certainly a topic that's very close to your heart. So for all of those reasons, I'm excited to have you here today. I know you have seen hundreds of accounts by now, if not more. And when you say you're looking at an account and they might have an incrementality problem, what does that mean typically?
So generally speaking, if you have an incrementality problem, it means that you're investing in acquisition channels, whatever they are, that might appear to be driving conversions, but in fact are just taking credit for activity that would otherwise have happened normally. Incremental conversion is exactly that, a conversion that is additional to what would have happened as the baseline. It's accretive, same sort of terminology. And so particularly as businesses get bigger, it becomes harder and harder for paid channels to drive incremental conversions, and for a myriad of reasons, but especially because the platforms are very good at taking credit for conversions and are actually optimizing to take credit for conversions, to drive conversions. And they can sometimes be working against your own interests if your real objective is to drive incremental conversions. And so it's definitely a challenge. I see it a lot. And it's kind of a category and platform agnostic problem that can touch basically all types of performance advertisers or all types of advertisers, really.
Yeah, I like the distinction you made about the real objective being to drive incremental conversions and not just conversions. And I think that is an important distinction that can become lost in even some of the big teams, even some publicly traded companies that I have seen, certainly.
For sure.
Yeah. And when you're looking at a lot of these accounts, what are some of the first signs or the most obvious signs that you see that an advertiser or an account might have an incrementality problem?
A couple things. If you see that they're currently considering view-through conversions as conversions, that's okay. For a very long time, Facebook's default attribution window was 28-day post-click, 1-day post-view. More recently, it became 7-day post-click, 1-day post-view. And soon the default will be just 7-day click. But the default method for attribution in this moment counts view-through conversions, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That said, if you have an advertiser that's using that default attribution, so they're considering view-through conversions, maybe they're even looking at a longer view-through window, and the view-through conversions constitute a very large percentage of all of the conversions, that's a sign. So it's like 50% of the conversions that I'm taking credit for are 1-day view, and another 50% are 7-day post-click. That's a little sketchy. So that's sign number one. Sign number two, if you see that retargeting or remarketing, depending on your preferred terminology, is more than 15% of the budget, maybe more than 20% of the budget, that's another sign. And those two signs in tandem often will lead you down the path to finding an incrementality issue, because it's a lot of view through, a lot of retargeting. Similarly, if branded search is a really big quote unquote channel or place of investment, that's another telltale sign. Those aren't the only signals, but those are big ones. I'll also look at the ratio of conversions that are coming 1-day post-click versus 7-day post-click. Basically, 1-day post-click conversions are much more likely to be accretive than even 7-day post-click conversions. So use some of those signals. And if a business is checking each of those boxes, 99% chance that if they were to run a holdout test or an incrementality test, it's going to be pretty devastating. That's my terminology. It will blow up their understanding of their own performance numbers.
Yeah. And when you say it can be devastating, of all the accounts you've seen, what are some of the typical situations when an advertiser has been surprised or shocked by the results?
I'll give you a real example. I was talking to somebody, he's cool with me sharing this anecdote, and I won't name the brand. Smart dude, smart team, all that. They said, hey, our CAC is 70. Okay, seems pretty good. D2C, subscription e-commerce, 70, all right. But I looked at it and said, ooh, a lot of the conversions are coming on a view-through basis, like a lot. And if you look at the performance solely on a 1-day click basis, it looked horrible, horrible, horrible. So we ran an incrementality test, and lo and behold, the cost per incremental purchaser was literally $1,000 plus. So more than 10 times, 13 times or something, what they thought they were acquiring customers at. So to me, that's pretty devastating. Basically, that business, you could turn this entire channel off. It's not going to do anything. It's not doing anything. So that is 10x. That's pretty bad. But what you want to see for a good account runs an incrementality test. Maybe the incremental CACs are 30 or 50% higher than what the pixel's reporting. That's okay. You can swallow that. That's all right. But you start pushing 5 or 10x, it means that every decision that you've ever made with respect to budgeting and planning and acquisition, all this stuff was wildly off. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, and that can upend the fundamentals of their business economics.
Absolutely.
What do they do from there?
So there's some prescriptions that are straightforward. Okay, well, we're going to change the attribution window. Great. You can run a test. Facebook will set up such a test with their reps and say, all right, well, what if I optimize for 1-day click? What if I 7-day click, default, whatever? What's my incremental CAC based on my different optimization windows. And maybe just by changing the optimization window, you solve the problem. Okay. These are not mutually exclusive solutions, mind you, but you can say, all right, well, maybe I just need to tighten up my exclusions. If I'm not being as aggressive as I can be in terms of excluding audiences, maybe I could be better there. By the way, that going back to your prior question, that would be another telltale sign. If your audience exclusions are weak, non-comprehensive, that's a bad sign for prospecting.
Right.
So, okay, I tighten my exclusions. I find a different optimization window. To some extent, it can be a budget allocation question. Well, what if I just make prospecting 90% of my budget instead of 50% of my budget? I dial my remarketing or targeting down. Those are easy prescriptions, okay? Testable, click some buttons, you're good to go. Or in the case of branded search, maybe I try pausing branded search for some time. If you do all of those things, and I have clients and I've spoken to people who've done all of those, arguably easy prescriptions, and they still have an incrementality problem, then it's a bit more esoteric. Well, shoot, what do? I've seen a couple solutions. I don't think any of these solutions are that great. The first is, well, I'm going to create creative that is more likely to attract an incremental audience as opposed to my kind of existing audience. Easier said than done. I don't know how you do that. I have absolutely no idea how you would go about that. So that solution never really spoke to me, frankly. But I've heard people say, yeah, well, we're going to try to address it with creative. Okay. Secondly, I've heard people say, well, we're optimizing our campaigns for maybe purchase, or if it's an app, some sort of in-app event. We're just going to try a more classical approach to media buying. 30% of the budget's going to be reach and frequency. 30% of the budget's going to be optimizing for video views. We're basically going to take our campaign that used to be purely purchase or app install or something, optimize and focus, and we're going to have more of a mix of strategies, with the rationale being the purchase optimization is not driving incremental purchasers. So maybe I just need to hit different pockets of the audience because Facebook's only optimizing for these purchasers. Well, what if I optimize for other brand lift metrics and stuff? Not a crazy prescription. Also not exactly my favorite, to be honest, in that comes with its own pitfalls. Now you're running video view campaigns and you're hitting subsets of the population that just suck. Perfectly nice people, no doubt, but they're literally less valuable, as evidenced by the CPMs. The CPMs for audiences are like the auction of advertisers deciding what the impressions are worth. So lo and behold, you start optimizing for video views, the CPMs go to $2 from 20. They're 1/10 as valuable to the entire auction. So that's problematic. You trade one problem of incrementality for another problem with potentially at least waste. So there's no real easy solution. The only other thing I could call out is Facebook had this beta functionality to do incremental purchase optimization. So you go on the ad set, instead of clicking purchase, you click incremental purchase. And my understanding is they were using a different model to do the optimization. I think that's going away because of all of the iOS 14 stuff. We have one client using that functionality and they told us to stop using it. So I'm not sure if this incremental optimization stuff is the real solution. So I think the best prescription is to, if you have that kind of a problem and you do all the steps and it's still looking bad, it's a channels question. Change the channel mix. If Facebook's not accretive or Google's not accretive, whatever, do something else. Maybe revisit it in 6 months or something, but you're trying to push a boulder uphill. It's just, in my experience, really hard. And then I have a subset of clients, even today, who run the incrementality tests. The results are not so great. So then they choose to ignore the incrementality test and just keep doing what they're doing. They're just like willful ignorance, which honestly I respect. That's a very aggressive choice. You got to be real confident to make that call. So that's another solution that honestly is employed more frequently than you might think.
Yeah, I have certainly seen that last solution. Like I said, certainly in publicly traded company, I have seen that among others. But what you're saying underscores that there's some low-hanging fruit that can absolutely be fixed. But maybe there's an underlying problem or challenge with the channels themselves. And speaking of some of the lower hanging fruit, so you're like, look, if a lot of the conversions are one-day click, then it's very likely to be accretive. One fix would just be to optimize for one-day click or maybe even 7-day click and make that happen. One risk with that could be the CPMs might go up.
That's
because
right.
you are by definition bidding for more targeted users, and the algorithm is picking up on the fact that these are more valuable users. So if an advertiser has a reservation about this and saying, look, I could bid for one day click, but that's going to kill my costs. Among the companies that you advise, if that comes up, how do you typically address that?
It's a straightforward problem. Let's assume you run an incrementality test and the results weren't great. So that's why we're having this conversation. Say, well, if I bid for one day click, my CACs are going to be terrible. So your CACs are terrible. You just choose to look at the numbers that look better. I cannot emphasize enough. Who gives a shit what the Facebook pixel says? It's meaningless. You really only care about the marginal cost or the incremental cost to acquire customers. That's how you can make a decision, a budgeting decision. So, oh, well, but like the CPMs will go up. Who cares? Right now, you're spending money at $1,000 incremental CAC, so you might as well just be setting it on fire. The better argument is, well, if the media costs get so expensive that even still, you can't drive incremental sales efficiently. It's no longer an incrementality problem. Now it's just a regular old performance problem. Tough luck. You got to change things up. You got to look at the channel mix, change the offer, do the usual user acquisition stuff. But it's an idiotic argument, basically, particularly in the face of an incrementality result to say, yeah, but if I change it, it's going to be better. Dude, it's already bad.
Yeah, I see. And is this more of a problem when you are on multiple channels than on just Facebook, or is that not an accurate understanding?
Well, yeah, I think the more channels you have in the mix, particularly digital channels that auto optimize things for purchases based on their own respective attribution windows, the probability that there's an incrementality challenge is higher just because there's multiple channels taking credit and multiple channels optimizing for the same purchase. For instance, if you have a business and you only run Snapchat, you spend $1 million in Snapchat, that's the only thing you do do literally nothing else, you drive $2 million a month in sales. Okay, you could probably reasonably say that those $2 million are a function of Snapchat. Maybe Snapchat's taking a little bit of credit for press and direct and organic search and stuff, but it's fine. If you then simultaneously add $1 million in Facebook spend, and it appears based on the pixel to be doing really, really well, but then your overall business only goes up by $100,000 in sales, say, oh, shoot, now we've got an incrementality problem. So I'd say, the more channels you have running, the more likely you are to run into these kind of problems. Again, the root problem here is just that the platforms are configured via their attribution settings to take credit for the conversions that they drive. And really, they're configured to take credit for as many conversions as possible. That's what the systems are built to do, because that's how they get paid. Well, that's certainly how they get evaluated. So if you have lots of systems doing exactly that, lo and behold, they're all trying to get in front of that one person who they know is going to buy because they visited the site a day ago or whatever. So I'd say it's more of a problem. That said, I definitely have seen businesses that really have only one paid channel, but they have a brand, they've got direct traffic, they've got organic, they've got ASO stuff going on. They have other sources, but they really only have one paid source. And you might say, oh, well, they're probably not an incrementality problem there. And I've even seen instances where that is not the case, where there is a major incrementality problem and they just don't realize it. So it's not like it only applies to companies doing lots of stuff or big companies. It can be a major problem for even medium-sized companies. I'd say by definition, it's not a problem for small companies, logically. But the more channels, probably the more likely you're going to run into problems.
Yeah. For somebody that is running multiple channels and they're like, look, let's use MMPs if they're mobile or Google Analytics if they are web to mediate the channels. Is there a way that could help them understand which channels performing better, or do you feel like that's not likely to help?
Couple disclaimers. I like all the MMP businesses. I think they're great. I think they've done a really good job in responding to this iOS 14 stuff and SK Ad Network and dealing with it for advertisers. So this is not a knock on MMPs, but MMPs have some major limitation as just a function of the platforms. Number one, they literally can only track people who click and install and stuff. There's no view through, nothing. That's a limitation imposed on them by the channels and by Apple and Google. I'm sure if they could track all that stuff, they would gladly. So you're already willfully ignoring, when you're using MMP tracking, any value of impressions that do not translate to clicks and installs in that moment. You're saying, I don't consider those, that they have no value, which obviously is not the case, practically speaking. So that's number one challenge. Number two, you're essentially doing last click attribution with the average MMP platform. That's the basic logic. And yeah, there are self-attributing channels like Facebook and Google that have their own logic, which is largely unknown to us. And yes, I know that some of the MMPs have their own quote unquote multi-touch weighting solutions, where essentially you can factor in all of the clicks. Again, only clicks are being considered, but nonetheless, all of the clicks, and say, oh, well, there's this click and then that click and then that click, et cetera. So it's not bad, I suppose. I don't think they're harmful in looking at these problems. But at the end of the day, so much of the app install volume is coming through self-attributing platforms that we don't, as app install advertisers, really know that much about what's going on. It's just whatever Google and Facebook says is going on is what we're giving credit for. So I don't know. I don't think the MMPs have any super obvious solution to me. What I think you're seeing more in the app install ecosystem, people talking about, oh, well, you got to do media mix modeling at a more elevated level. Media mix modeling and incrementality testing are kind of the same thing. A media mix model is trying to establish what's the right media mix that generates the best outcome at the channel level. And an incrementality test basically are trying to prove out what's the right level for each channel that generates the best outcome. Slightly different approach, but really fundamentally they're in the same school of thought. So that, I think, is a more likely solution / way forward on these sorts of problems. I don't know, maybe the MMPs start to build media mix modeling / forecasting functionality into their tools. I think that would be a logical product thing. What if scenario analysis, if I spend this much on this platform and this much on this platform, what do I expect the outcome to be? And then they actually run a test and prove that. I think that would be cool. But yeah, the fact that they can only attribute clicks and installs and stuff, and you're ignoring the value of views entirely and engagements entirely, makes them, I think, a little less well positioned to take on some of this incrementality business.
Yeah, and of course, with SKR networks, it becomes certainly a lot trickier because
you have even less visibility than you had before. Right. So that's already blowing it up. Really, I think for an app install advertiser, the main solution is to think about geographies and say, well, I'm going to run these channels on and off. I'm going to run these channels on and off, these channels on and off, based on, it could be countries, or even better, it could be zip codes or postal codes at that level. So it's sort of randomized. And then look at performance based on geographies. That's how holdout testing has been done historically in channels like radio and TV. And largely thanks to all of this iOS 14 IDFA business, that sort of geographic holdout testing is going to be more popular. It's going to be more practical because, for instance, Facebook is saying, hey, if it's an opted out user, they're in Facebook and Instagram, they opt out of the ATT prompt thing, we're not going to even include them in our lift tests. So there you go, 50, 60% of the population, they're gone. You can't run this sort of measurement, but you could always say, in California and New York, I'm going to turn off search. In Ohio and Pennsylvania, I'm going to turn off Facebook and whatever you want. And again, zip codes would probably be smarter, but for the sake of argument, you can run that test across all platforms, any time of the day, app install, don't care. As long as you can report on results at that same geographic level, you'll get real clean data out of it. So that I think will be more common than it is today. That's very rarely done today in digital. Sure. But that's probably the most ideal solution, given the constraints that are coming in now.
Sure. And something else that you've also written about is looking at the blended numbers, because that's literally a source of truth. And use that to guide all decision making.
If you approach the problem from the perspective of, I don't care what the pixels say, I just care about the outcome, then you work back. You start with the thing you care about, and then you work back. You're trying to come up with a rules-based system that says, all right, well, I want my blended cost of acquisition to be 100. And it seems like when I do a $50 CAC in Facebook and a $20 CAC in Google and a $200 CAC in Snapchat, it seems like my blended number comes out to be 100. And that's what I wanted anyways. And now I'm going to change it. What if I make my Facebook number 70 and my Snapchat number 150? Whatever. That it's a very simplistic approach, mind you, but it does keep you honest. And so you don't find yourself in a position where, oh, well, my CPIs are $3. My cost of acquiring a paid player is $20. And yet the business sucks overall. You've been keeping your eye on the numbers you actually cared about the whole time. You probably would have identified a problem sooner versus you could keep running according to what the Facebook SDK says until the end of time. And you keep hitting your $20 per new player number or whatever.
Yeah.
So certainly looking at blended stuff, marketing as a percentage of sales, old school, obviously, but that's a good grounding number to keep in mind, to basically to keep yourself honest as a performance marketer.
Yeah, that's certainly something we are advocating in the uncertainty of the iOS 14 changes, which is until we sort out what's happening, let's look at the blended numbers. Let's see.
You have to. I think especially for the app install world, the SK ad network stuff, well, you can track people for 24 hours and, whatever. Instantly, a lot of the attributed conversions are gone. So you just have to look at the blended and then again, establish your business rules, which say, well, okay, it used to be that when I had a $5 CPI, it worked out. Now, if I have a $7 CPI, it's okay as long as blah, blah, blah. You sort of reset all of those guideposts. I think that's a practical reality.
Yeah, certainly. So much food for thought. And as it has been every time I've spoken to you, Adam, I've learned a ton. This is certainly something I will forward to our team. And of course, I'm excited to post this on the podcast. This is perhaps a good place for us to wrap. Before we do that, can you tell folks how they can find out about you and everything you do?
The easiest path is I have a weekly newsletter, which is grow.co. I've written it for many, many, many years. In that newsletter, we will promote the MAU events, which are our in-person events for the mobile app install ecosystem. We'll promote our MAU Talk podcast, which is my podcast for the app install ecosystem. And then in my day job, I have my own growth agency. I have a team of 60 or 70. We're working on lots of campaigns. We're called Thesis. And I write a lot about attribution and tracking and all the stuff we basically just discussed. And I include those blog posts in that grow.co newsletter every week. So that's probably the easiest way to track me down if anybody wants to.
Wonderful. And we will link to all of that in the show notes and the highlights. But for now, thank you so much, Adam, for being on the Mobile User Acquisition Show.
Oh, my pleasure.
For more tips, pointers, and strategies from the leading edge of mobile user acquisition, subscribe to our YouTube channel right here, or check out our blog, rocketship.hq.com/blog.